I want to start today by reading you my favorite chapter in the Bible. It's Psalms 27. And it says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my strength and my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle, he shall hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock. And now shall my head be lifted up above my enemies round about me. Therefore will I offer in the tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing praises unto the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me and answer me. When thou sayest, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. Hide not thy face far from me. Put not thy servant away in anger. Thou hast been my help. Leave me not, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in a plain path because of my enemies. Deliver me not over unto the will of my enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thee, thy heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord." December 17th, 1990. And I can't stand still, so that's why you'll see me moving some. Can everybody hear me okay in the back? December 17th, 1990 was a day that forever changed my life. It was a Monday, and it was 1 week before Christmas. And I remember waking up that morning and I was such in a good mood. I was like, yeah, Christmas is in a week. You know, the mall where I worked had Christmas stuff everywhere. So I got up and I started making food because I worked in the evening. I went to school in the daytime. And I was married at the time. I was 19 years old. And a lot of times I'd come home late. So I didn't get to cook my husband any dinner. So I made all this dinner before I went to work. I went to work. I got there a little bit earlier than normal. Normally I'd go in about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Most everybody's been down to Westgate Mall. Well, I worked in a little store called GNC, the General Nutrition Center. And that day I got there about 3 o'clock. So when I did, I got a really, really good parking place. It was right up, near the front entrance of the mall. Because a lot of times, especially around Christmas, everybody doing that last minute Christmas shopping, I'd be way off in the distance. So this particular day, I got that really close parking spot. So I remember going in, and my manager had gone to get something to eat, and she had come back, and she had parked right beside me. And I remember about 7 o'clock, she said, "Debbie, you get off at 9 tonight. Usually I close the store," which around Christmas it was 10 o'clock. She said, "But why don't you just say to 10 o'clock, we can get all this shipment," we had this big shipment of stock come in, all these vitamins. She said, "Why don't you just stay so we can get all this stuff put up?" And I remember thinking, oh, I don't know. I'd been standing on my feet for hours. And when you're 5.5 months pregnant, you don't like to stand up for hours on end. So by the time 9 o'clock came, I had had a good evening. I remember my brother and sister had come by. They were doing some Christmas shopping. They came by to say hey. But by 9 o'clock, I was ready to go. I had been up all day, I'd gone to school, I'd fixed dinner, supper early, and I had been staying on my feet for the past 6 hours. I said, no, we will finish this tomorrow. I just don't have the energy right now. Well, just about every night that I left the mall, I had one of the security guards walk with me. You know, I wasn't gonna go out there by myself, but this particular evening, the security guard that was on duty, he was tied up at the other end of the mall with a shoplifter. And I remember standing there thinking, I don't want to wait another 10 or 15 minutes for him to finish, to walk me straight out of the front entrance of the mall. You know, if it was way off in the distance, I would have understood. So I got my little bag, I had a bag, and I told my manager, I said, I'm just gonna go on, you know, I'll be fine. Well, I walked out of the front entrance of the mall, and I remember hearing somebody walk behind me. And I turned to look, and it looked like a man, and it looked like he was walking towards me, and it looked like he was walking really fast. That gut instinct said, danger, run, get away. And I remember looking off in the distance, and I mean, the mall was packed. There were cars everywhere, but I didn't see anybody out there. They were all inside. So as soon as I thought that, another part of me said, Debbie, you're being silly. Here's a man, he's walking his car just like you are. So I had my keys in my hand, because they always say, keep your keys out. So I had my bag, I had my keys out. I got to my car. I had a two-door car at the time. I unlocked my car door, and just as I was opening it, I felt something cold against my neck. See, this was this man. He was dressed all in black. He had a black ski mask pulled over his face, black clothes, black shoes, black gloves on. And he took about a 6 or 7 inch hut knife, grabbed me by the throat, and told me not to scream, not to yell. And at that point, it was like everything was happening in slow motion. You know, I was paralyzed with fear. You know, you hear this fight or flight instinct, but they don't talk about the fear that immobilizes you. So, I mean, I couldn't do anything. He told me, he pushed me in the car, so I went in the car. I remember he pushed me over to the passenger side, floorboard side of the car. And I remember trying to get up, and I looked up and I saw a barrel of a gun in my face. And he said, put your head down. And I put my head down. Well, he took my car, fumbled with the keys. He drove it to the other side of the mall, I found out later. He took the front seat of my car and reclined it all the way back and made me lay face down in the seat, the front seat. And he took my hands and he handcuffed my hands behind my back. Then he took a piece of silver electrical duct tape and he taped my mouth so I couldn't speak. Then he took an ace bandage, like you wrap around your leg or ankle, and he blindfolded me. So here I was laying face down in the front seat of the car. I couldn't see, I couldn't talk, I couldn't move, and I was petrified. I didn't know what this man wanted. He kept talking about cocaine. He needed money to buy cocaine. He moved me from the front seat of my car to the back seat of his car. And he had asked me where my bank was, and I told him. It was on Regal Road in Spartanburg. I told him how much money I had in there. I even told him this is how much I have in the savings account, not the checking account. So I remember we pulled off going to the bank, and I remember hearing the car stop. And even though I was blindfolded, I could kind of see up and kind of see down a little bit, and I remember seeing a little window, and I remember it was tinted almost black, because I kept hoping somebody would ride by and see me. He went evidently and used my bank card, and he came back a minute later and he was yelling and screaming and cussing at me. Well, I didn't know what was wrong. I told him how much was in there. What I didn't know at that time, you know, now everybody uses cards. Well, I had not had that debit card long, and there was only so much money you could get out at a time. And he had gotten out the max, and he was not happy. And he told me, he said, I'll try one more place. Then if I get what I want, I'll let you go. Well, I lived right near the bank off Regal Road. These are roads I drove every day. I went to school this way. I went to work this way. And when it came time to kind of turn to go back to the mall, even though I couldn't see, I knew about how far it was. We were going not 45 miles an hour, we were going 65, 70. And I knew we were on the interstate. And all I kept thinking is, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna stab me and throw my body in a ditch somewhere? And I just prayed, Lord, just, please help me. You wanna talk about fear. I don't think I've ever been that scared before. But he kept driving, and I remember listening to songs on the radio because he had the radio playing, and just trying to figure out, if he dumps me, I'm not going to know where I am. How am I going to know to go call somebody to come get me? Well, I found out later he took me over the state line into Polk County, North Carolina, where he lived at the time. I remember when we got there, he pulled me out, and the blindfold had gotten really loose at this time because my head was on the front seat of the back seat of this car he had. And I remember seeing a wooded area to the right, and I remember hearing cows mooing that way. And I thought, good gracious, where are we? But like I said, I found out later it was his house in Polk County, North Carolina. When he took me inside, he put that gun to my head again, and he said, if you try anything, this is what you get. For the next 4 hours, this man beat and raped me repeatedly. And I remember praying, God, just please, please, please don't let him hurt my baby. And I remember at one point telling the guy, please don't hurt me. But that gut instinct said, what is he gonna do if you tell him you're pregnant? So it's like God put something over my mouth so I didn't tell him. I said I'd been sick, I hadn't felt good. But I did not want anything to happen to my baby because I could feel him moving around, even though I wasn't that big at the time because I was young. But I could feel James moving around. And I remember just praying. He would go in, out of the room. He'd come back in the room. He'd beat me. He'd leave. He'd come back in. He'd rape me. He talked about cocaine. He said, you want some cocaine? Here, take some cocaine. And I still had this bandage over my eyes, and all I kept doing was praying, Lord, please don't let him put this drug in my body to hurt my baby. And at one point in the evening, the blindfold fell off. And he said, go ahead, look at me, and told me exactly how he would slit my throat if he did. And I remember I kept my eyes tightly shut. I did not want to see this man, did not want to see him. A few hours later, I remember it's like his whole demeanor changed. And he said, get dressed. He put me back in his car. He drove me back behind near Westgate Mall, if some of you know where Toys R Us used to be. I guess it's got the jumping place there now. But behind there. And I remember before he let me out, he told me how corrupt the police were. Oh yeah, you call them, I will find you. And see, he had my pocketbook, he had my driver's license, he knew where I lived. He said, I'll find you and I will come back. So I remember when he let me out, I was so scared. I just wanted to get in a ditch and hide. I just wanted to hide from him. I was so afraid he was going to come back. But something inside me said, just run. So I ran all the way around this big building until I saw a payphone. I know we don't have those anymore, but back then in 1990 they did. And I went to the payphone and I dialed 911 just like I'd always been taught to do. And then it seemed like everything at that point happened at fast. I see a big truck with lights on it, and it pulls up. This man jumps out, starts running towards me, saying my name. And I remember telling the operator, he's back. And I just took off running. Well, what I didn't know is when I didn't come home that night, that people were out looking for me. That my husband had come out trying to find my car. That my brother, my mother, my sister, people I don't even know were out trying to find me. They found my car. And my husband said the first thing that kind of made it strange is where my car was. It wasn't even in a parking place. It was just kind of thrown over somewhere. The second thing is my doors were unlocked, and I never kept my doors unlocked. And when he looked down in the car, there was that 6 or 7 inch Hutton knife, the kind that you put in a holder. And he had dropped that knife, and my husband, the police, had found that. So here I was thinking, I'll just go home and just, I didn't know what I was going to do. Because he had asked me on the way back, well, what are you going to do? Is anybody going to miss you? I said, I'll just go home and make up something. But what I didn't realize was that one of the people looking for me, her boyfriend had a wrecker truck. So when the 911 call came through, he heard it, and they pulled up. But I didn't know it. In my head, it was just, here is a man, he's running towards me, saying my name, didn't know who he was. So it seemed like everything happened at once at that point. I remember seeing city cars pull up, county cars pull up, and there an ambulance pulled up, and right behind them was WSBA TV 7. Well, they put me in the ambulance, and they took me to the hospital. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had no idea. They take me to the hospital, and then they start wanting to know what this man did, what happened. And I think the best thing that one of the officers ever did was make my husband leave that room. Because this man had beat me so bad I had welts on my back. And the handcuffs, I had started pulling. My wrists were cut and bleeding. I had cuts on my hand. It was just stuff at that point. They were asking me questions that I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to have to explain to the stranger everything that happened to me. But I spent, I guess it's about 6 hours up there before they let me go. The next day, I had to meet with some more police officers. I remember it was about 2 days later, my brother calls me, and he was so excited. He said, they got him, Debbie. They got him. He's in jail. And I remember thinking, well, that's good. He won't be able to hurt anybody else. But here it was. I was safe. And that fear was worse than ever. Everywhere I turned, everywhere I looked, I was scared. I was petrified. I didn't want to go out of the house. I was afraid to stay in the house. It wasn't until I met a girl. There was a lady in the hospital with me that night from the local rape crisis center. And she didn't say a whole lot, but she let me know that there was people out there that knew what I was going through and that could help me. And I met a girl that I felt like knew what I was going through and who I could talk to about it. He was arrested at a local bar spending my money that he took out of my account because he used it 2 more times. I never saw this man. See, I could pick out his voice, but I couldn't pick out if he was in this room and say that he did it. We went to court in South Carolina when I was 9 months pregnant. And when I say I was 9 months pregnant, I was 9 months pregnant. This is what I tell people, I worked in a vitamin store and I ate those children's chewable vitamins like candy, and I think that's what made my son so big. But we went to court. The prosecutor had asked me, do you want to wait till after you have this baby or you want to do it now? And I said, I want to do it now. I want to get this over with. So for 3 days, I had to get in front of him and testify. I had to listen to his lies, saying that we knew each other and we had had an affair and, whatever else he made up. He was charged in South Carolina with kidnapping and armed robbery. He was found guilty. He got life plus 25 years in South Carolina. A year later, he ended up pleading guilty to kidnapping and 4 counts of criminal sexual conduct. He got another life plus 25 years to run consecutive in North Carolina. But I go back, during this time, I started talking to this person that was in the hotel room with me that told me there's an agency out there that can help you. I got really involved in the local rape crisis center, and I ended up working for them. They said I was always there, so they offered me a job as their volunteer coordinator. I did that for a while, I went to work for the 7th Judicial Circuit Solicitor's Office as their violent crime counselor for 3.5 years, working with victims of crime that way. And then I spent 10 years working for the Spartanburg Public Safety Department. So I kind of worked for each of the agencies that helped me during that time. And that was my part of my recovery. But I want to go back to what happened immediately following my assault. The only place that I would go is to the doctor or to my mother's house or home. I came home one day and my husband was waiting for me behind the front door with a knife. And here I am, scared to death, to go anywhere. And when I came in, he grabbed me just like this man did. Right like this, with the knife right there. Because he wanted to see if I could have fought. Got a scar on my hand from the cut I got from fighting. The next few years, he was very physically and verbally abusive, to the point where my son would get in front of him and say, "Don't you hurt my mama." In January of 1995, he asked me to leave. He said, "I want you to leave. I want you to leave the house. I want the house. You just take the kids and go." You know what I did? I took my kids and I left. It took my daughter 1 week to stop crying because she knew she wasn't at her house. After a week, she got used to it. I found me another part-time job to work with my full-time job. About 3 weeks later, he calls me and goes, "I want you to come back home." And I said, "No, you can't do that. You can't just play these little games, especially with kids." And kind of fast forward the next week, he became very, very violent. He would follow me. He would call me, call places I was. At that point, I worked for the solicitor's office. I worked at the courthouse. Well, not just anybody could walk in there, but he was a police officer, so he could walk in there with his gun. I remember the 12th of February, he went and picked my son up from school and wouldn't let me have him unless I came back home. So I came back home that weekend. And I remember that Monday morning, it was Valentine's Day. And I had been up all night making cupcakes for my son's class because they always volunteered me to make the cupcakes for some reason. And I remember leaving that day knowing I would never come back to that house. And I went and saw my mama at work that day. And I said, "Mama," I said, "promise me, if anything happens to me, that you'll take care of my children." And Mama started crying. And I said, "Mama, I don't need you to cry. I just need you to tell me that you'll take care of my kids." And she was like, "Yes, yes, yes." So we already had a plan what to do with the children. I went back to work to finish some stuff up, and we were going to leave and take them down to Charleston, where my brother was in medical school. And I called him to tell him I wasn't coming back home. And he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at my mama's." He said, "No, you're not. I just went by there." And I had to tell him, I said, "You know what?" I said, "You need help." And I said, "You need to go to the doctor. You need to go see someone." And he said, "I know I do. I know I do. I will go if you'll come and pick me up and take me." And one of the hardest things I ever had to do was say, "No, I can't. I will get the police chief to take you. I'll get, your mom, your dad." I said, "But I can't." And at that point, he told me that he wanted to be buried with his uniform on. He said, "Promise me you'll never change James's last name," and just on and on and on and on. And I remember talking, and he said, "Will you just be quiet and listen?" And I did. And then when I didn't hear anything, I ran to the office beside me and I called the police chief and I said, "You need to get over there now." Well, before they could get over there, I heard a firecracker go off. And he'd shot himself in the head. Now you try explaining to a 3-year-old and 11-month-old what their daddy did. And, you know, the good thing about kids is they can only take certain news and certain stuff, you know, little by little. And that's what we did. We worked on it, you know, the different developmental stages. But I'm going to tell you, my daughter has always wondered, did he leave because he didn't love me? You know, how do you explain? It's not about you, it's about what they're going through. So I tell people, you know, when things affect us, they affect the people around us. That's one reason, if some of you know, I told my mama she couldn't come today because she always boo-hoos, which is okay, but she has to relive that trauma too. Because over the past, my son is 33 years, he came up for parole after 7 years. 7 years in the state of South Carolina. So I counted them up the other day, 11 times I have gone, and mostly with my sister and my mother, we're the 3 consistent ones, every 2 years, except for COVID when we had to do it at home with the video. We have been there to say, do not let this man out. Do not let him out. Do I think if he got out, he would have hurt me? No, at that point, I don't. But I think he would have done it to somebody else, and I think that person wouldn't have been as lucky as me, because he told me, you're luckier than the last girl. I got a visit somewhere in between all the parole hearings from a cold case homicide detective from Denver, Colorado, where this man was from. And he basically said they knew that this man was named Peter. So they basically knew that Peter had killed somebody. They were just trying to get enough evidence to convict him. And that really made me think, you know, he had killed somebody before. He had told me, I'm luckier than the last girl. May 23rd, 2023. And I know this is kind of bad, but it's kind of good. I got a text message from the South Carolina Department of Corrections that said Peter Fred Hernandez is dead. And I can't tell you the relief I felt that he, you know, that I didn't have to go to any more parole hearings. It was like I had a life sentence that I had to keep going, that I had to prove this man shouldn't get out, to protect young girls, to protect old girls, women, whoever this man would have attacked. But come to find out, he hung himself in jail on May 23rd. And when I look back in that verses I read to you, it's just a chapter that I have spent a lot of time reading. Because afterwards you think, wow, you know, that was terrible, you know, you can talk to people about it. But let me tell you, there were days when I prayed, why did he not just kill me? Why did he just not kill me? The times I felt so alone, that I felt so angry at God, angry at people, angry at that man. I mean, so many different feelings. Nobody understands. And when you lose a loved one, I try to tell people, don't try to make it okay, because we mean well, but sometimes the things we say hurt more than they help. And I knew that. People would say things and they wanted to help, but they didn't know how. But there were some very, very, very dark times. There were times that I made some very bad decisions, that I was very mad at God, that, you know, if he loved me, he would not have allowed this happen to me. Back in high school especially, my daddy died when I was 18. I just turned 18, just graduated high school. He had cancer and he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't even sit in a wheelchair and go to my graduation. That's how sick he was. But I remember Daddy was real rough on me. I'm a middle child, so that explains it probably. But Daddy was really rough on me, and I just remember him, and I could see the look on his face today. He looked at me and he said, Debbie, you don't understand, but one day you will. And I know that if my daddy hadn't conditioned me the way he did, I'd buck him, I'd get in trouble, I'd stayed in trouble. But I believe that if it wasn't for that discipline, if it wasn't for that godly family raising me up, I wouldn't be here today. If it wasn't for this Bible. In the past 5 years, I hate to say 5 because I was in my late 40s, I had to finally say, God, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm making bad choices. I don't know. What do you want from me? And I've really, really strived every day. I finally figured out why they said we have to die to ourselves every day. You know, to say, God, what is your will? What do you want me to do? Not what do I want to do? You know, because sometimes God asks us to do things that aren't comfortable, that aren't happy, that make us squirm. You know, but I remember, you know, that He loved me so much. I wasn't by myself that night. I know I wasn't by myself because I prayed the whole night. The whole night. And I know people were praying for me. People I didn't even know. And that still pray for me. So my heart's desire right now is to be the kind of person that He wants me to be, to do what He wants me to do, you know, whether it's comfortable or not. And like, I try to bring my grandchildren to church. Yeah, Mom and Daddy need to bring them, but if they don't, Grandma's going to bring them because they need that foundation. I had that foundation. They need it. This book here I have, it's falling apart, but I love this book. Anything I ever want to know is in that book. So if any of you ever, you know, need somebody to talk to, I did spend 20-something years as a crisis counselor. I tell people, I do the crisis counselor and then I send you out. But I thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. One other thing I did want to mention, I forgot to mention this, but right when he died, he has a daughter that evidently lives near me and knows who I am, knows everything about me. She messaged me on Facebook, this long, nice, nasty letter, and I blocked her. And then she messaged me again on like my page. I mean, she was bound and determined to get to me. Blocked her there. And then she messaged my son, and that was the wrong thing to do. He wasn't going to tell me what he said. He just said, Mama, she will never bother you again. But you know, God allowed me to have a perfectly healthy 9-pound, 3-ounce baby boy. There was not a thing wrong with him. He looked like he was 3 months old when he was born. And a few years ago, I almost brought the picture, but I said, no, I'm not going to. Really, really just blessed me so when I saw James standing in the the west wing of the White House, because he spent 6 months working there as an internship. And I thought, here the devil tried everything he could to stop that child from being born. And you know what? God has the victory, and God deserves the victory in everything we do and say. Okay, I don't know how good I talk, but I told her about 45 minutes. But I thank y'all for letting me share, you know, just a little part of me and my story. And it is my story. It's a long story. It's a never-ending story, because every day You know, y'all all have your stories. We all struggle. You know, I've had people say, well, what I went through wasn't as bad as what you went through. You don't know, I don't know what you went through. We all have things we've gone through. But know that as what the body of Christ, as women in Christ, we need to spend more time lifting each other up than putting other people down. You know, it's so easy to criticize, but to lift each other up, you know, not just on Sunday morning or Sunday night, but all the time. We need it. But I thank y'all.